Hi, everyone. And I see some names of people I haven't seen for a while. Hi, it's good to see you again, or you see your name in there. So I wanted to talk about food myths, nutrition myths. There's so many of them. So let's start at the very beginning. Why do I recommend a grain and a separate vegetable dish at every meal? So in order to get complete nutrition, this is perhaps the most important thing. Grains represent the entire plant kingdom, the entire biological kingdom of plants condensed into one. Grain means the seed and the fruit merge into one without any separation. So the seed is the beginning and fruit is the end of the plant kingdom. Grain is the entire plant kingdom merged into one. Grain also can reproduce itself endlessly. That's the saying, which is literal, one grain, 10,000 grains. The plants, the vegetables, on the other hand, are the parts of the plant kingdom which come in between the seed and the fruit. What that means, if you plant a seed, or if you remember back from school when you sprouted seeds, the root grows down, the stem goes up, and it goes into a leaf. Eventually, if we let it go, it'll flower and then form a fruit. So the parts in between the seed and the fruit are the root, stem, and leaf that we call the vegetables. So the grain is the whole plant kingdom, and the vegetables are the parts. They complete each other to oneness. They provide the basis of the most balanced nutrition. Now, grains have the ideal proportion of minerals to proteins to carbohydrates that we need for ideal nutrition. And this is why, well, one of the reasons we take grains as the center of every meal, because it sets our appetite, our taste for all other nutrients. So the ratio is 1 to 7, 7 times as much protein as minerals, 7 times as much carbohydrates as protein. Grains are the only food that fall on the spectrum, and 1 to 7 means the balance of 5 to 10, or perhaps even 11. So the balance between that is approximately 1 to 7, and grains have that. The next closest food is beans. No other foods are close at all. Animal foods and dairy foods basically have zero or next to zero carbohydrate, just to put into perspective. So my longtime experience, and I've talked about this before, is health craves health. Once you eat a healthy food, you automatically start to crave other healthy foods. When you eat a balanced healthy food, you start to crave more balance. So we create the whole idea behind the strengthening health approach is balance perpetuates itself. So the grain and vegetable dish, separate vegetable dish as the basis of the meal, set the pattern. Soup further completes it because soup conditions our digestive system. And as science is finally catching up, our gut, our microbiome, is the basis of health and immunity pretty much on every level. So the basis of our approach are grain, a separate vegetable dish, and a soup. Okay. Now, one of the biggest myths is that we need dairy food in order to get calcium. But let's think, where do minerals come from? Well, the Earth's crust. That means anything that grows in the Earth's crust is abundant in minerals, of course, depending on the soil, and the location. Many people are concerned about calcium. Calcium is the 5th most abundant mineral in the Earth's crust. Any plant food, any, that grows on the earth, grows in soil, has calcium. It especially concentrates in greens and beans. And interestingly enough, these two are the most important source for potassium, because so many people say, well, I'm going to grab a banana for potassium, which is really not a great source. Greens and beans are. Now, the funny thing is, dairy food is high in calcium, but it actually causes our body to lose calcium. So when we eat animal, and especially dairy foods, they create an acidifying effect in our body. In order to neutralize the acidity, the over-acidity, which our body's trying to do at every moment, we need minerals. Out of all minerals, we especially need calcium to reduce the acidity from the animal and dairy foods. So when you eat dairy that does have a lot of calcium, the calcium is basically going to neutralize the acidity and it's going out through urination. You're not getting it. Osteoporosis is a disease of developed people, developed countries. Less developed countries that don't have access to animal and dairy foods, that eat grains, beans, vegetables, and fruits, don't have osteoporosis. And the interesting thing is, even if you have severe osteoporosis, if you eat a grain, bean, and vegetable-based diet, your bones remineralize. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding. Some people say, well, don't eat grains or soak brown rice and discard the water to get rid of the phytic acid, because phytic acid is interfering with mineral absorption and utilization. Well, that's true if you have a very high percentage of grains, let's say an 80% grain diet. That might be the case. But in the levels of grain that we eat in macrobiotics, the phytic acid actually has the effect of strengthening our bones and nervous system and our immunity. In other words, it's actually adding to our mineral absorption and utilization. So it's one of the things I didn't even have on my list, but I just thought about phytic acid in grains and beans is really an asset, because the other thing about phytic acid is it encapsulates toxins, heavy metal toxins, and also even radiation, isolates it and carries it out of the body. So not only is the phytic acid in grains and beans preserving our nutrition, especially for our bones and nervous system, it's helping to detoxify our body and protect against harmful pollutants that we're exposed to knowingly and unknowingly all the time. Okay, so that's why we recommend grains and beans, calcium. So, greens and beans are the main source of calcium, especially white beans, and that includes tofu, but any white beans and all leafy greens, not only the dark ones, any leafy green whatsoever, kale and collards and bok choy and napa cabbage and watercress and scallions, and they all have an arugula. It's all good. Romaine. Okay. After that, it's sesame seeds. And it is a good idea, especially for growing children, but also for adults, to have either toasted tan or black sesame seeds on a regular basis. They're a very good source of calcium and other minerals. After that, the next best source for calcium is actually miso soup made with wakame or wakame seaweed and leafy greens. Wakame is very high as far as sea vegetables go. Soybeans are high, so the miso, tofu, the overall combination is very good for our bones, strength, and flexibility. Now, a lot of people think, well, seaweed is the main source of calcium and minerals in the macrobiotic diet, but that's not true. Seaweed's a minor source. It's more the grains, beans, and vegetables. And seaweed's like a further supplement. Okay. Then where do we get other minerals from? Well, we do get a certain degree of minerals from sea vegetables, from nori, wakame, kombu, arame, possibly hijiki. But you don't want to load up on sea vegetables, though they do provide a valuable source of minerals. The other valuable source of minerals is in pickled foods, naturally pickled foods. So miso is really a pickle. It's a grain and bean pickle. Also, pickled vegetables, sauerkraut and kimchi. Also, umeboshi plums and homemade pickles. A lot of people like to make their own homemade pickles. So when you have the mineral salt that's used in the pickling fermentation process, it makes the salt far more absorbable. It makes the salt softer. And as far as salt itself, we recommend SI brand salt if you live in America. It's really wonderful, wonderful salt. But the way you can tell whether salt is good or not is by the taste. Good salt, the first taste when it hits your tongue is sweet. You taste sweetness before saltiness. Then the second thing, the taste is soft and not hard. It needs to qualify for both of those things to be high quality sea salt. If the first taste is salty rather than sweet, it's not good. If it's hard, it's not absorbed in the same way. When it has that sweetness and softness, our body absorbs it very well. It creates more flexibility than hardness. Okay. So that's essentially for minerals. Plants. We're brought up to think that plant protein, animal and dairy protein, is superior to plant protein. And it's interesting. A very brief history. The chemical industry was developed for World War II. After the war, the chemicals were used in food processing and agriculture, petroleum-based fertilizers, which created a boom, an incredible surplus of grains and beans. So what were they going to do with all those grains and beans? Well, feed them to animals. So then we had a surplus of animal and dairy food. So the next thing was that the USDA, together with Harvard School of Nutrition, created the basic four: animal foods, dairy foods, fruits and vegetables, and starches. So if you think about that, that's saying animal and dairy food should be 50% of our diet. That's outrageous, unthinkable. Then they manufactured fake science saying we need animal and dairy foods to get complete chains of essential amino acids, right, for complete proteins for strong bodies. It's a mythology. It's not true at all. As a matter of fact, animal food is second quality protein. So animals eat plants. We're eating plants directly from the earth or through animals. So if we eat animal food, we're letting the animals digest, process the plants, create into protein, but with all the toxification that goes along with that. If we use dairy products, that's third quality protein, because then the animals are further creating dairy food. According to Colin Campbell's research, dairy food is the most carcinogenic food on the planet. It goes to cancer much more easily and quickly than even animal protein. And we're going to have a summer conference, July 17th and 18th, and Colin Campbell will be speaking on the history of proteins. And because it's a very important part of his latest book, and also about the coronavirus. So you can get it there directly from the source, and a lot more technical information than I can give you. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is plants have the highest quality, most usable protein, but in the exact proportion that we need for optimal health, together with the minerals and carbohydrates we need to balance it, and finally with the fiber to move it through our digestive system quickly and efficiently, and to carry out toxification with it. So there's no better nutrition on the planet, including protein, than from plant foods. Now, there's a lot of controversy about oil. A lot of the MDs and researchers that I respect are on this no oil kick. And I will call it a kick, and I mean that respectfully, but Macrobiotics is based on history, and human experience. 10 to 12,000 years since agriculture, grain cultivation began. Again, let's say more simply, about 4 to 6,000 years since grains dispersed on the planet, each grains to the different continents. So we have a very clear evidence, descriptions about, grain consumption. The other thing that happened in that same period of time, around 6,000 years ago, two oils began to be used, sesame and olive. And they're the only two oils that can be made completely naturally, mechanically pressed without heat at low temperature, without any chemical solvents. So they became the two most important oils on the planet, sesame and extra virgin olive oil, which are the oils we recommend in macrobiotics. And the question is, can we be healthy with just the oil and fat that's present in, grains, beans, seeds, and nuts? And the answer is yes, but the question is for how long? So this is my question. I go first on history and human experience, and then second on science, because science is always changing. Since I became aware of science, one year they say this, the next year they say the opposite. One decade they say this, the next it's the opposite. It's always changing. History and human experience are consistent from generation to generation over the millennia. So what is the purpose of oil? Number one, it tastes good. It's satisfying. It's more easy to feel satisfied. But oil aids in the absorption of minerals and fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. So we absorb and utilize those minerals more fully, more completely when we use oil in, I'll say, food preparation, not only cooking, with salad as well. Something fatty aids in the absorption. Together with that, oil is high energy. So if you're doing hard physical work or playing sports, you get that energy from oil, but it makes you feel more energetic when you eat oil. Macrobiotics has passed the test of time. By that I mean, macrobiotic people, including myself, have had families, some small, some large. In every case, the children are significantly stronger than the parents, physically and mentally, brighter, stronger. Those kids have gone and gotten together with other either macrobiotic kids or health interested, partners, and then had the third generation of macrobiotics. So it'd be my grandchildren. They, again, are stronger, healthier, and brighter than their parents. In other words, with macrobiotics, each generation is getting stronger and healthier, stronger bone structure. Most are in the top 50% for height and weight. If you look, the rest of society, each generation is getting markedly weaker, right? Each generation, if you look from World War II, each generation and the baby boomers, then each decade after that, people are weaker and weaker. Well, with macrobiotic children, we know that each generation is getting stronger, and that will continue into the future. We don't really know that from people who are abstaining from oil for a long period of time through pregnancy and raising children. We do know it through macrobiotics. Okay. Then, salt, again, has a bad reputation. Some people recommend don't use salt, no salt, sugar, or oil. But salt, again, follows the course of human history. It was the original commodity. Salt is salary, where it comes from. Salt or minerals are our resistance, physical and mental resistance. Right now, I'm very concerned because so many people look to science and the government for what's healthy rather than doing their own research, their own thinking, and becoming more self-reliant. I don't know. To me, it doesn't make me feel comfortable. But what I can say is people that use good quality minerals, including sea salt, develop physical and mental resistance. They have developed the ability to be independent and think independently, figure things out for themselves, and to rely, to have confidence in those decisions. A friend, a longtime friend who's an MD, sent me an article today worried about some of the things that I think. Some scientist, I said, I'm confident in my ability to create my own health. This is a kind of funny story. Years ago, in the 80s, and I lived in London, there was this woman on the course who really had some serious mental health problems, but she was very psychic. And she came to my house one day, unannounced, walked in, and then locked the doors, and then started saying all these things. And then she went on to say that Michio Kushi had lung cancer. I was, concerned. Right after she left, I called Michio. And he said, is she healthy? I said, no, very unhealthy. He said, George Osel would never listen to psychics that are unhealthy. Don't listen to psychics at all, but especially if they're unhealthy. He said, second, that's not true. He said, third, even if it was true, I take care of it myself. No need to worry. So in every sense, I was happy with Michio's response of self-reliance and self-responsibility. It's really, that's macrobiotic thinking. That's macrobiotic lifestyle. If I create a problem, I'll deal with it. Okay. Foods that are under attack. Okay. What else is under attack? The sun. The sun is our friend. All of life depends on the sun. The more sun we get, the better. Up until your skin getting mildly red. You don't want to get sunburned. But you want to spend as much time as you can in the sun, especially being active, doing things, walking, gardening, talking, whatever. Laying in the sun is not as healthy. Being active in the sun, you utilize the sun's energy much better. Okay, brown rice is under attack for arsenic. Southern rice may be an issue because cotton was grown and they used arsenic-based pesticides. California rice, on the other hand, is low in arsenic. All rice worldwide absorbs arsenic. But people that eat rice worldwide have less cancer than other people. So to me, the proof is always in the taste of the pudding. Rice-eating people have less cancer. They don't have obesity. They don't have the health problems we have. Together with that, again, the phytic acid in the rice helps to encapsulate heavy metals, including arsenic, and carry it out of the body. So I always recommend cooking rice with another grain. So if there should be an arsenic problem, then the other grain or bean, the phytic acid in there, would have a mitigating effect and take care of it. Now, I got concerned after reading all those articles, so I thought I would go to a doctor for the second time since I've been macrobiotics and get a complete blood test, including mineral analysis, to see if I had any levels of arsenic or other metals to worry about. Everything was good. I didn't. So having eaten rice for more than 50 years now, I think if, and sometimes lots and lots of rice, if arsenic would have been a problem, I think I would have been the prime example of it. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that. Soak the rice, cook it with another grain. The gluten grains. The gluten grains are among the healthiest grains on the planet. Barley, farro, spelt, rye, oats, they're all healthy for our vitality. Now, there's something interesting. George Osel fashioned macrobiotics after the diet of Zen monks, temple cooking. And one of the things they do is they use a lot of wheat gluten in their cooking. They call seitan and fu. And I thought for a long time, why? Well, one, it's good for physical strength and vitality. In some ways, it's more strengthening than animal protein. But then I finally discovered that gluten activates your immune system, strengthens it. So if you have an unhealthy diet like the modern diet and you eat the gluten grains, it makes you eliminate, detoxify. You get symptoms. You think gluten is no good. Now, of course, donuts and cookies and pastries, that kind of gluten is no good. But barley, spelt, rye, oats are among the healthiest foods on the planet, eaten as grains or on used to sourdough bread or pasta or things like that. So if you have an allergy or sensitivity to that, my suggestion is reintroduce them very little by little so they don't cause uncomfortable symptoms. Corn is almost totally destroyed by Monsanto, by GMO corn. So for corn, you have to be very careful that it's organic GMO and especially polenta. At home, Susan and I have been eating polenta on a regular basis. It's one of my favorite foods. I can't recommend polenta enough. It's a wonderful, wonderful food. And of course, sweet corn in season. Soy is another one. And people say phytoestrogens are not good for estrogen-based diseases and cancers. Again, completely untrue. Now, soy isolate, that means textured soy protein, TSP, or textured vegetable protein, TVP, are very unhealthy, highly acidifying, and inflammatory. However, all traditional soy products, miso, shoyu, natural soy sauce, tofu, tempeh, natto, and edamame, the boiled soybeans or steamed soybeans, are all very, very healthy. And the unfermented soy products are especially protective against reproductive cancers, male and female, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer. So some people say, well, only fermented soy products are good. Not true again. Traditional soy products are among the healthiest foods on the planet. How do I know this? All traditional people have the same dietary pattern: grains, beans, vegetables, seeds, nuts, and fruits, naturally fermented foods, mild beverages, and mild sweeteners. It's the same throughout the world for 10,000 years. One exception: Japan or Asia uses seaweeds and soy products. Especially Japan, has the greatest longevity of any planet, of any country in the planet. So again, and beans are under attack because of lectins. Soak them and cook them well. Sweeteners. A lot of people recommend agave nectar and stevia. They're on my worst sweeteners list. In Macrobiotics, we recommend barley malt, brown rice syrup, and maple syrup. Maple syrup, in some ways, is my favorite. So they're the sweeteners I'd recommend. And one last thing before opening up to questions is stress, a friend or a foe. Well, Arnold Toynbee, the great historian, interpreted history according to challenge and response, that for a civilization to develop and thrive, they would need sufficient enough challenge from the environment and from neighboring people. If there was insufficient challenge, they couldn't develop and thrive. If the challenge was too great, they couldn't. But in other words, challenge means stress. Stress is good for our health and our life. Too much is not good. So what we've been exposed to, over the last year is really too much for many people. So many people's health has gone down. They've gained weight, their blood sugar's off, fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, diabetes. Too much stress, more than our capacity, is not good. So we need to guard against that, but to try to avoid stress is not healthy. So salt, sun, and stress, these are so-called yang factors in macrobiotics. They're all necessary to use with respect for our own health and our own development. So the long and short of it is the combination of grains, beans, and vegetables, seeds, nuts, and fruits, naturally pickled and fermented foods, mild beverages, mild sweeteners provide the most abundant nutrition on the planet. Most abundant, not adequate, abundant. Excellent. Now, what about supplements? Is there any need for supplements? Well, vitamin B12, you can supplement. It's not toxic. Methyl B12, sublingual, dissolves, underneath your tongue. The main source of B12 worldwide is dirt. The main source in dirt is from manure. We were an agrarian society, 80% agricultural before the Industrial Revolution, mainly small farms. You had the animals, which you grew your own food. The manure went into the soil. We ate the vegetables. It's a micronutrient. It's a byproduct of fermentation. So in the crevices in the vegetables was B12. Well, we've gotten away from that. We've gotten into factory farming, into monoculture, where soil's not the same. So if you're not getting food, the majority of your food from naturally farmed with good soil, you may have a B12 issue. Some people never do, some do. So if you're worried, take a B12 supplement. If you want to know for sure, get a blood test. You should be between 400 and 1,000. They say 200 is normal, it's too low. You should be at least 400. But if it's too much, you excrete that. The one other one I'm on the edge about, and that is vitamin D. John McDougall thinks low vitamin D is caused by our poor health, not by a lack of vitamin D. And that low vitamin D doesn't actually cause problems. It's our health makes vitamin D low. Most of us are sun deficient. So I'm not opposed to vitamin D supplementation in winter from time to time. I've talked to Colin Campbell about it. He's adamantly against supplementation. So it's completely unnecessary. He may be right. That I don't know for sure. So if you're concerned, again, if you're below 20, 20 is high enough. If you're below 20 on a blood test, you may want to do it. They inflated the values 30 to 50. I don't know if that's necessary. I don't think so at all. So B12, I can say for sure. Vitamin D, if it's a low amount of supplementation, I don't think would be harmful in the short run. From May to October, get as much sunlight as you can. So that's in a short period of time, everything I can think of about nutritional myths. I'm happy to try to answer some questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jenny, for that insightful information. At this time, as Jenny mentioned, we can move on to our Q&A segment, which I would say we can take about 10 to 15 minutes, which means we'll probably wrap up around 4:50 Eastern time. As always, we'll be taking questions either directly written into the chat that may be preferred in case you don't want to ask a question verbally, as this is a live event that's being recorded that will be available online, YouTube, and Facebook. So if you don't want your face on camera, I would suggest just submitting a question directly in the chat. Otherwise, you can unmute yourself. I will notice that you are unmuted, and then I will call upon you directly. So I just ask that you just unmute, and then I can call upon you. But right now, we do have a question. The question asks, how do you account for the popularity of the medical medium diet that is essentially raw with emphasis on juices as celery, blueberry, etc., and smoothies, and very little carbs and very little cooked food?
I think it's a natural response, a reaction to a high animal food, high fire diet. Is people are eating lots of fast foods cooked at very high temperatures, lots of animal foods, lots of dairy foods, lots of fried and fatty foods. It's kind of a reaction. So I'm not surprised at all. Then they can settle with macrobiotics in the middle.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question that we have, the question asks, what is plantar fasciitis from?
Uh, yang, in other words, if you're not familiar with yang, from cheese or from chicken, especially poultry or cheese, together with baked and salty foods, are the main causes. The cure is stay away from those things and eat all the foods we've been talking about without too much salt.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see. I have a question here. It asks, you mentioned earlier the idea of making sure that foods are grown in soil, of course, for minerals. What about hydroponics?
Well, I can't say there's no use for it, but we're meant to eat food that grows on the soil. That's the process. So the environment produces the planet, the basic elements, the sea, land, fresh water, the air. It's all minerals, the celestial world. So, and the minerals concentrate in the crust of the earth. Plants grow there and we eat them. That's really a source. Now, sea vegetables do grow in water, but it's mainly salt water. But they do in tropical climates, they do use lake weeds, which is a valuable source of minerals there. Like Southeast Asia and Africa, they use lake weeds as well as seaweeds. But personally, when I've had hydroponic foods, I haven't felt satisfied. I don't feel the same nourishment and satisfaction as when they foods grown on the soil.
Right. Thank you. Looks like there's a follow-up to the question about the plantar fasciitis. The individual mentions that they do not eat any of the foods that you highlighted. Is there anything else?
Peanut butter or nuts can do it. And it can be those foods from the past as well. So basically, yang discharges downward into central areas. Which is basically what that is. So it's got to be from yang foods, from the present or the past. But nuts and nut butters act in a very similar way to cheese in the body.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, bananas are a possibility as well.
And as a reminder, once again, we're taking some questions for the next 10 minutes. You can send them directly in the chat. For anyone who wants to ask a question verbally, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand and I'll call directly on you. Sandra, feel free, go ahead.
I'm not on Facebook. I don't know how to ask in writing, actually. How do I ask in writing?
You can just ask me, it's fine.
You can go, you can ask.
Oh, because I didn't know how to write it down. So but a couple of questions. It's about vegan diets, because some of my relatives are vegan.
Yeah.
And they eat a lot of corn, Q-U-O-R-N, which is, and I don't know if it's the same in America, in the States, but in England, it's quite popular. So what do you think about corn and all these different vegan options that they now sell in the supermarkets in the UK? I don't know about the US, but UK. What do you think about those, Danny?
I'm not sure what corn is, Q-U-O-R-N. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, there's a lot of foods that are basically fake foods, fake cheese, fake chicken, fake meat. Those I don't think are healthy at all. Basically, in macrobiotics, we eat food, all food. So we're not eating food from a laboratory, which a lot of those, fake foods. A lot of people, to me, I would choose to eat animal or dairy food if I wanted to, but I wouldn't eat a fake food.
So they are fake foods, you think, that even if it's like a vegetable, a combination, say, of not the corn, but say a vegetable, different vegetables mixed together, potato starch, for example, and other vegetables mixed together and made into a burger, for example.
Yeah, well, you can make, veggie burgers from grains, beans, seeds. I've had some very delicious veggie burgers made from foods. But once you start,
Yeah, but the ready-made ones, are they no good? The ready-made ones?
Some of them are. It's product to product. I'd have to see the product. Some of them I think are very good, and some are not so good. There's a range.
Okay.
You have to evaluate by what the ingredients and how they're made.
Yeah, but the corn is no good, or you don't
I'm
know.
not, I am not familiar with it. I haven't seen it.
It's very,
So
very, very popular in the UK. All the vegans, all the vegan people eat corn.
if you send me the label privately, email it to me with the
Okay,
ingredients, I'll tell you what I think.
all right
All right,
then.
okay.
Thank you, Danny.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Our next question asks, is nutritional yeast good for you?
Not really tasty, but yeast yeast is extremely yin. You know, the food industry doesn't like to lose money on anything. They use every possible thing. So, you know, in macrobiotics, we use sourdough. Sourdough is a natural fermentation. All natural fermentations create nutrients that didn't exist before. So if you eat unyeasted sourdough bread, you're having a unique traditional fermented food. Anything that uses yeast, you know, I can't say anything because like koji, you can make fermentations with, you know, rice yeast or things that are quite interesting. So there's probably some uses that I'm not really thinking about, but overall, I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll say we have maybe time for a few more questions. We have about maybe 5 minutes or so. If you're watching on Facebook Live, I know there is a little bit of a delay, but I am watching the comment section. So if I see a comment, you know, pop up on Facebook Live, I'll try to make sure to ask any here. Our next question that we have, what is the best calming drink before bed?
Wow, I think that depends on the person. I mean, Blanchett tea is our main beverage, but some people get stimulated. Now that wakes them up. Um, for some people, like kuzu with rice syrup is good. Other people, you can have warm soy milk as you know, instead of milk. Um, I don't know if there really is, but I'm not opposed to herbal teas. So if you find an herbal tea like chamomile tea that you find soothing, I think that's fine as well.
Excellent. And I do have some comments here from the Facebook Live, so I want to make sure that they feel included as well too. We have a comment from William Spear in regards to your information about sun exposure. He says yes, also mentioning that sun exposure from May to October needs to mean no sunscreen or vitamin D is not likely to be accumulated. So a comment that he wanted to add there.
Right. Thank
Looks like-
you. I agree. Without sunscreen.
Looks like we have another question here. So question says or asks, food is very important, but the spirit or emotion is so important to our health. Please say something about that.
I agree. I mean, how can you argue with that? You know, food puts us in a position to be open and receptive, but it doesn't do the work for us. So, of course, taking, you know, care of our actions, of our emotions, of our thoughts, and, you know, trying to live in a way that, you know, we believe in. I think that's the complement. I mean, food puts us in a position to live our life fully. That's the way I see it.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have a couple of questions that are here in the chat. And I'm also just looking at the Facebook Live, another question there. This may be, I think we'll just take 3 more questions. So 1, 2, and 3 that we have. So I apologize, we may just have to cease with our questions. Of course, we'll have more sessions in the coming month as well too. Our first question that we have here, could you just say more about the paradigm shift around eating related to strengthening health?
Well, I think the change, you know, when I started Macrobiotics, a lot was about restriction, about what not to do. And there was a very strong emphasis on the Japanese style of eating and cooking, which I have great respect and admiration for. But what occurred to me one day, there's much more value in adding and not worrying about taking away, of changing the percentage of healthy to unhealthy, So our approach is for people to add healthy dietary and lifestyle practices at their own pace, to, slow and steady wins the race. Together with that, with basically embracing the world's cuisine. So not only all of Asian cuisine, but Indian, Middle Eastern, European, as well as African. And the one thing that's unique to macrobiotics is indigenous, trying to choose foods that have originated in a similar climatic zone, but at least try to say, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, north of the equator, as just a safety guideline. But so I think it's a much more open and embracing approach to macrobiotic practice, but still using the same principles of harmony and balance and change.
Thank you. Just reading this question here. Our next question, could it be that since vitamin D is a hormone and therefore yin, that us young macros with tight livers can't process it effectively?
Well, I do think, first of all, I do think vitamin D is yang rather than yin, but my experience or observation is people that have kidney and liver issues end up with vitamin D issues, which is really the thing. And it's actually the same thing, intestinal, kidney, and liver, which is beyond, B12 problems. So however you look at it, macrobiotics is about creating a balance in our diet, in our activity, in our relationships with our environment, creating a balance that nourishes and supports all of our organs. At the same time, everyone, without exception, has strengths and weaknesses. So, your weaknesses, kidneys and liver, then you might have more of an issue with those nutrients than other people.
Okay, thank you. All right, and our final two questions, maybe Denny, if you maybe have like a brief response that you can provide for some of these here. Our first, is it advisable to discard soaking water from grains and beans before cooking?
For beans, yes, except azuki beans, then we can use the soaking water, sometimes black soybeans. Other beans, for sure, discard the soaking water. For grains, we use it. There's controversy. Some people think, because of phytic acid and arsenic, discard the water in the rice. My viewpoint is when you soak rice, it prepares the sprout and creates nutrients that didn't exist before. Those nutrients go into the water. So we use the soaking water, we always have, and for the last many years I can think of, we always cook brown rice with another grain, 2 or 3 parts brown rice with barley, millet, farro, bulgur, or lentils, or something, another grain or bean. We always make a combination, and that's just our approach. It's worked for us, and it's also what I recommend to my clients, and it seems to work for them.
Excellent. And our final question, this question is about varicose veins. What causes it and some foods that could help?
So varicose veins are more from fatty foods, from butter, cream, oily foods, fried foods, together with fructose, especially tropical fruits and concentrated fructose, like high fructose corn syrup or agave nectar, things of that. That combination creates varicose veins. So basically a fiber and mineral-rich diet together with the body rub can help varicose veins.
Excellent, thank you. All right, well, that was our final question, and that ends our Q&A for our Nutrition Myths webinar with Denny Waxman. Denny, do you have any closing statements or remarks? And then after, I will go into some updates.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm very passionate about these things, about food myths and food and natural nutrition. So I'm happy to have the opportunity to express these things. Hope to see you soon, and thank you to Ron for making this happen.
All right, you're welcome. And I'm looking into the Facebook Live here. Someone just asked, when's the next presentation? Absolutely what I want to let everyone know about. Of course, this is not the last opportunity to hear from Denny. Denny offers free webinars every Wednesday, the first Wednesday, is that correct? The first Wednesday of the month, or the second, I believe it's the first, but we're going to have another webinar on May 5th of next month. The title and the theme will be revealed shortly in my follow-up email that I'll send out tomorrow. Also, too, we'll be having another webinar with not just Denny, but also with his wife, Susan Waxman, this Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern time. If you've not already registered for that, that's going to be on bone health. So I'll make sure to give information in the follow-up email tomorrow to register for that. But if you want to go ahead, it's actually on our shimacrobiotics.org website. Upcoming webinars, you can check out information there, as well as for any upcoming information and webinar series. And of course, there's some people who are already on this on a weekly basis. Susan offers a free macrobiotic webinar support to any client of Denny, but also to individuals that are interested. There is an option of a rolling payment for that if you're interested in macrobiotic support. That's every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And also too, I know Denny mentioned it a little bit earlier. Oh, the time for May, it's going to be the same time as today, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So Wednesday, May 5th, 4 p.m. Eastern time. And Denny already mentioned this a little bit earlier. You may want to highlight it a little bit again, Denny, our spring macrobiotic conference from July 17th through 18th. Denny, did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Only we are very excited about it. We really have an all-star lineup. I mentioned Colin Campbell will be doing 2 classes. Neil Bernard will be doing a class on hormones, very exciting things. We also invited Christina Perella, who many of you know. I've seen, and Sherry Damaris does her TV show. A lot of people know her as well. And a few other people will have a class in traditional Korean cooking, and we'll have some very good movement classes. So it's really a great lineup, and I think it's the most exciting program we had in recent times. So, you know, you really want to check this one out.
Absolutely, thank you. And as always, the support from all of you here today supporting this webinar, and then we always have generous contributors and donors over the years in the last few months, especially with these webinar series. We appreciate all of you. Without you, this series and all of the information and criteria that we have on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis would not be possible. So we just ask to just continue supporting, continue sharing. This video will be available on Facebook. It's actually available right now on Facebook, the recording. If you want to rewatch, share it on your Facebook page with a friend or family member, share the YouTube, all these different things to help the message and this information to continue to grow. I have a very excited caller here right now, but I'll disregard that and come back to that. But thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We hope to see you again later on this week, and then also for the following month of our additional webinar. So have a great evening, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good to see you.
Thank you, Denny.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
Karan. Excellent, as usual.
Thank you.
Love you.